Welcome to the Lights, Camera, Action Entertainment Reviews Podcast.
The world is changed. Much that once was is lost. For none now live who remember it. History became legend. Legend became myth. And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost.
Our Lord of the Rings retrospective continues.
It has now been found.
Is it secret? Is it safe?
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my axe. Carry the fate of us all, little one.
We're coming too!
Mr. Frodo's not going anywhere without me.
You will face evil, and you will defeat it.
On this episode, we will be discussing and reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Are you frightened?
Yes.
Not nearly frightened enough.
This episode will contain spoilers. Listener discretion is advised.
There will be no dawn for men.
And now, here are your hosts for this episode. Mike Winkler, Alister Englehart, and Daniel English. Welcome back to the Lord of the Rings retrospective here on the Lights, Camera, Action Entertainment Reviews podcast. I am here again with Alister Englehart and Daniel English. Glad to have you guys back for The Two Towers.
Thanks for having us, Mike.
Let's do it.
All right. So, a lot longer than Fellowship. I definitely felt it this time around. So, what do you guys want to get into?
Well, I guess my initial thought around the film is I like it from a purely entertainment standpoint. I really actually my favorite scene of the entire trilogy is in this film, and it is the arrival of Gandalf and Éomer at the very end. I just every time I've watched it, that is the ones there. Well, there's two scenes actually, and both of which are in this movie that bring me to tears each time I see it. And that is one of them. Even though ironically, Éomer was not the one to arrive with Gandalf in the books. The second was Theodred's funeral, the death of Theoden's son. And that was actually a scene that, as we're talking about the extended version, had a little bit of content added to the extended version, which wasn't in the original. But in any case, the funeral itself is in both the extended and the cinematic version. And gosh, I've watched this movie probably 9-10 times, and I actually feel like each time I watch it, and perhaps now because I have kids of my own, it's gotten sadder for me. Like despite expecting it, I think a combination of the story itself and also the acting by the actor who plays Theoden. Just really moving scene. But anyways, kind of my original thought, again, from an entertainment standpoint, I really like this film. I love the battle scenes. From a Tolkien fan standpoint, this is maybe my least favorite of the three, just because they changed so much from the book on this one. But yeah, so I have mixed feelings personally.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be no surprise for me, but my favorite parts usually revolve around Gandalf too, as they do in Fellowship.
Yep.
And again, so this time watching, I tried to remember what it was like seeing it the first time. And so some firsts. It's the first time we get to actually see Gollum, and we talked about this a little bit last time. I just love how the movie's aged. I think Gollum looks great. I did notice some Nazgul scenes that looked a little dated.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's like when they're flying over the marsh. It just, you could tell it aged a little bit.
Yeah.
Not quite as bad as the stormtrooper on a creature in
Oh no.
near Mos Eisley, but and then I loved when they're walking in Fangorn Forest and you hear the voice. It's Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli in pursuit of the hobbits, and they mix Saruman and Gandalf's voice. And I remember the first time you see that, the Riders of Rohan talking about the White Wizard. Yeah, and they're like, the White Wizard is cunning. And so I don't remember how much I expected or didn't expect to see Gandalf again, but I thought they handled it in a really cool way. And just, I've always been interested in the capacities of the reborn Gandalf, because he talks about like, that's what they called me, and he has this damaged memory almost, and so and the statement he says about being Saruman, or as Saruman should have been, just a very, I think there's a lot under that I'm interested to dive in, because I haven't read the books, or rather I haven't read the second or third in the trilogy, so I just feel like there's got to be more to that transformation that's going on. But yeah, other than that, I love the battles too. I actually forgot how much I liked the Battle of Helm's Deep. I think it might be the best battle in the series.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I loved it, as I always do every time I watch.
You know, it's funny because I think the one thing I took away from this movie is that I really didn't realize that we have a good solid 2 hours before we really get a full-on battle scene in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least in the extended cut. I mean,
With
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know how it went in the theatrical cut per se, but I realized, I looked at the running time when the first battle started. I'm like, oh my God, it's almost been 2 hours before there's actually been a lengthy battle, because we've gotten little exchanges and little battles throughout the movie, but nothing as big as the Battle of Helm's Deep, of course. But you know, I think the one thing too, it's the one negative thing I kind of take away from the movie, and I think it's the extended cut that does it. And you guys can tell me if I'm right on this, but all the scenes of Pippin and Merry in the woods with the tree, right?
The Ents, yeah, with the Ents, right.
Right. Were those scenes extended because they seemed overly long, and it seemed like it dragged the extended cut down a bit?
Oh yeah. So
they're not all extended.
They're not all extended, but the whole the manipulation by Pippin was actually that was one of the scenes that was almost in complete opposition to the books. So the Entmoot in the books immediately resulted in an act of war by the Ents upon Isengard. So they decided, not complete opposite, because they were kind of taking a very neutral stance in the movie, but but there wasn't this hesitancy to get involved.
So why do you think they made that change?
They made that change in a number of ways. So I feel like, for the sake of a script that's maybe compelling now to what viewers are looking for nowadays, they introduced conflict to a number of characters that never experienced that conflict. So we talked last time about Aragorn and some of the conflicts they introduced with Aragorn. Faramir was far more conflicted in the films than he was in the books. In the books, he never took after his brother. He recognized how off his brother had been from the start, and vowed an oath to protect Frodo and to never take him to Minas Tirith. But in the movies, that's like a good 45 minutes,
right? Yeah,
of like all putting together of him, of him kind of showing the same weakness that his brother did, and I never understood. Like I said, I never understood that. I think the only thing that I can think of, and some of the forums that I was reading in preparation for today kind of hit on this too, is that there's almost the sense in which goodness, just pure goodness, or characters that don't have that kind of rough side are boring. and that without controversy, the story is boring. And
interesting.
I think there's something to that. You know, I wonder if nowadays if maybe that is what people are looking for, and if some elements of what Tolkien recognized make up a truly good story, might have been lost on today's view. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I feel like, obviously I don't know the book story in these cases, but I think it just adds to drama.
Yeah.
One thing I that really stuck out to me in Fellowship was Gandalf's harshness to Pippin. And I feel as though Pippin's craftily getting the Ents involved was the beginning of a redemption arc for him. To when I mean he's never not foolish, but I think he proves himself to be a pretty noble character. So if I had to stab in the dark, really not knowing, I would say the Ents are more of a novelty part of the movies, and Pippin is a core character, and so why not give the decisiveness and the urgency to Pippin and Merry to convince the Ents, instead of the Ents kind of deciding in their council right away. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you guys are right, because the biggest problem, especially with Hollywood, is that when they're doing an adaptation from a book, they almost feel like they have to take it upon themselves to insert stuff that's not in there for entertainment value, so it holds the non-book reader's interests. And I guess there's a good and a bad balance of doing that. I mean, if you add something to the movie that works and it doesn't completely divert from the material, I guess it's okay to do. But when you're changing something so crucial from the book that people might have resonated with or got shocked by, and then you're completely going the other direction, it kind of almost ruins the adaptation. It ruins that scene. It ruins the flow, because you're like, that's what I liked about the book, and the movie is changing that. And it's not always the greatest idea to go about that. And I think that's something that Hollywood needs to learn. And they actually do the same thing with video game movie adaptations. They never follow the source material. They always want to find a way to add something new to it. You have the story in front of you. Follow the game. That's what made the game popular. Follow that story.
So I'm going to dissent here just a little bit. And not in every way, but I went through this when I was younger. I had read the Harry Potter books, and so each movie I wanted the book to be on the screen, and I had a really hard time with every change that was made. But it also kind of started this thought of, is it okay to change the material, to adapt the material? And I think sometimes changes can be really effective, or clever or creative, and they can expose something new or recontextualize the material to make it more enjoyable. Again, I'm lacking in my understanding of the Lord of the Rings trilogy novels, but I think that would be one of the things I wanted to do, was talk a little bit about what I had heard was in the book, maybe characters that were conflated, locations, events, and kind of get your perspective, Alister. Because one of the things I think I look for is, why were the changes made? What did the changes do to the characters? Did it communicate something maybe even more clearly than the text did? As an example, when you were talking about Fellowship, I love that scene where Aragorn closes Frodo's hand around the ring.
That's a great scene.
And if that's not in the book, I think I'm okay. That's not my only rubric. But then to your point, Mike, sometimes I feel like the changes don't understand or respect the source material.
Correct.
And I think there's no better example than that, than the live action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh my God, yeah.
And
That's
so
so awful.
it's like, and I think it's a little bit the difference between Marvel and DC that we talked about last time. Like, if you don't understand and love your source material, you might not create something that the community will appreciate. And after all, the community's the whole reason you're developing it. So one of the things I had heard was Brago the horse was a hat tip to a king in the books.
Brago, I don't remember that piece.
So the horse that ends up, he's really wild in the barn, and the two eyes are like, they can't get him, and Aragorn speaks Elvish to the horse and quiets him down, and that's when Éowyn kind of recognizes that he's something special, and he says to him, Brago, that's a kingly name. I had heard that they changed a King Brago into the horse because they didn't put him in the movie, but they were like, hey, we still want to, point this guy out. And the horse obviously, saves him in a way, like picks him up from off that ledge that he fell.
Well, yeah, that I'd have to go back because I don't remember Brago. But that scene actually is another one that's only in the films. So the warg battle wasn't in the book, though. It wasn't in Two Towers. There was a warg battle directly before the Mines of Moria in the Fellowship, and it wasn't. It was a little bit of a different context. But in any case, so Aragorn actually, there wasn't really like a moment when he was separated from the party prior to him going into the mountain to take the path to interact with the dead in the books. So I don't know. I'll have to go back and look up Brago. I don't remember him specifically.
So the second one
Yeah.
was the extended version of the Fangorn Forest with Merry and Pippin when they're drinking the water and they're kind of running around and they get pulled into the trees. And, I think it's Treebeard that releases them from the trees. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Fangorn the first forest they go into and they get sucked into the trees, and that's where Tom Bombadil comes in?
So the first forest they went into in the Fellowship was the Old Forest.
Okay.
And Old Man Willow was in that first. Yeah, you're right. That was another moment when I think that some elements of the Fellowship were kind of getting merged.
Yeah.
With the Two Towers. Yeah, good, fun scene. I forgot about that scene.
Yeah, I did like that one. I like their bandying.
Yeah. But
now,
you're
how
right.
Many...
Yeah, it was Tom Bombadil.
Now, how many elements from like because Alister, I've read the Fellowship, but it's been a long time, so I don't really remember everything that was in Fellowship from the book that was in the movie. Was anything from Fellowship carried over into the Two Towers with the source material? Did they carry some stuff over that wasn't supposed to be in there?
Yeah, actually, the Fellowship in the book actually ends sooner, if I remember correctly, than the movie does. So
the battle in the forest does not happen in the book. That's how Two Towers begins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, I'm trying to think of any other. Those are the only two that come to mind. Maybe if we're talking about it more, will come to mind though. Yeah. Huh.
Interesting.
What do you all think of? I was curious to just kind of bring to mind Arwen, who is much more prominent in the Fellowship and Return of the King than she was in Two Towers. But what do you all think of Éowyn and the whole kind of almost like a romance thread between her and Aragorn? Was that just thoughts on that whole piece?
Well, I mean, it was heavily hinted at in Fellowship. I mean, they had their scenes, but the thing of it is that is that something that was prevalent in the books?
Éowyn, yeah. So Éowyn was definitely a prominent character. She ends up with Faramir in the Return of the King, which we don't see in the movies, but yeah, she was definitely part of the books as well. But she was younger. But she was younger. Yeah, she was like almost like a barely out of her teenage years, like a young 20-something.
Oh wow!
I think she has a really cool part, and I like her as the fulfillment of the prophecy. Her fawning over Aragorn is something I don't particularly like in the films. When he comes back and she's like, oh, and it's almost like her role, until she serves a greater purpose in the films, is to be a third-party viewer of Aragorn's like distance from Arwen. I don't know. And so when they're getting ready to go to arm up for battle at Helm's Deep, and she's like, they wouldn't part from you because they love you. Sorry. And I'm just like, I mean, how does she barely knows this guy?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it just doesn't feel authentic, and I think he handles it pretty gracefully, but I just don't. Yeah. So I don't love it.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Dan. I think the first time that I watched the Two Towers, the first few times I watched the Two Towers, I felt like it was inauthentic from an acting perspective or like a storytelling perspective. But the most recent few times that I've watched it, I think what you're referring to is that the love itself comes across as inauthentic, like in a real way to the story, but like inauthentic love. And I agree. I think there was a line that she said recently that kind of betrayed to me what I think is going on with Éowyn, which is when she says she fears a cage when he asks her, what do you fear, my lady? And that's all she's afraid of. I think that she's attracted to what Aragorn stands for, with kind of like this adventurous, gruff kind of leader that's a little bit different than Theoden in that way. Like Theoden to me seems like a groomed king. Like he's very traditionally kingly.
Yeah.
And Aragorn,
last I checked, Theoden was king. Yeah, well, and I mean, look at Aragorn making the kingly decisions and begrudgingly eventually adopting the title. And I think it boils down to his awareness of the potential corruption of man's heart is what makes him such a great leader, is his ability to recognize, deceitful things come out of the heart, and he's worried about that. What strength is in his blood, I think, is really him asking, what weakness do I carry because of my humanity? But and like I said, I like Éowyn's story arc minus Aragorn. I love her and Gimli's relationship. I really love the way she helps Merry later on when she views, it's kind of like Captain America's line when he wants to join the military, and he's like, it's not about me. Guys are out there laying down their lives. I have no right to do anything less than they I don't remember exactly how it says.
Yeah.
It's this duty that calls them to say, I don't care if I'm, a woman or I'm a hobbit. We want to be fighting. That's our duty, and that's our striving. Yeah. But just the romance angle. And if they would have played it as more of like a respect, but
yeah. So funny, a little bit of fun trivia. The character of Éowyn was actually created a while before Arwen, and was originally intended by Tolkien to be Aragorn's love interest.
Really?
And he actually he later created Arwen, and like this decades long love story between her and Aragorn, and then had transitioned to wanting Arwen to die, saving Theoden.
Wow.
But later changed his mind again.
Arwen or Éowyn?
He actually, Éowyn. Yeah. Oh. He wanted her to die, saving Theoden in that last battle, where she ends up killing the Witch King. So I just thought that was kind of cool.
That is cool.
He invested quite a bit into Éowyn's character, trying to figure out the best way to fit her into the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest issues too I had with like Fellowship, one of the most cringeworthy scenes was those scenes that Aragorn shared with Arwen. It almost kind of came off as in Arwen, when she saw Aragorn, the way she acted, she was like a cheerleader at a party, and the popular guy walked through the door and she got all giddy. That's how I kind of saw their scenes. Now the relationship develops pretty well after that. It's just the
Sure.
scenes in the Fellowship that were just kind of, I don't know.
It's hard, I think, to get I think that they did not capture the history between the two of them as well as they did in the book, and I think it'd be hard to really do that. I don't know how they could have done it differently to make it more effective. I definitely see where you're coming from, Mike. I think it's a little bit rushed and doesn't do justice to how long their relationship had actually been going on prior to that. I mean, they were essentially betrothed in a manner of speaking, or engaged prior to that. And you don't really see that. You don't really see really any of that history.
I don't know.
Definitely read the books.
Well, the thing of it is that's something like Hollywood could have added. Like, could you have seen like maybe like a scene or two before that scene where after he first sees her, we get a flashback of something, a memory or a moment they shared. Therefore, we get a little bit of insight to who they are.
Well, I hope so in the extended version. I really want that.
Yeah, once they release the extended extensions.
Yeah, extended version with new reshoots, but yet they somehow look all older, but it's supposed to take place in the past. Yeah.
Well, at some point we should talk about how they're going to be doing an Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings live action series.
I wanted to ask you guys about that.
Really?
Like, is it going to follow the books? Is it going to be a separate series?
Different actors?
I know very little about it, except occasionally I see potential casting updates.
Web television series. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
different people.
Are they rebooting it and following the books, or is it going to be like take place in the movie universe with different characters?
Oh my gosh.
So I think it's going to be a reboot.
Oh God!
Yeah, and
I don't know any of these people.
No.
Even Ian McKellen was.
Mixed.
I can't remember the exact rumors
I
was reading, but
I don't like any of these people's faces.
How are they going to make this look and feel better than the originals? It's going to be a TV version of a big screen movie. There is no way this works.
They could do it.
Oh,
you gotta
man.
have faith.
Oh shit! I mean, what are they going to do differently they already haven't done? Are we going to see the same scenes over and over again?
So for one, we're going to have just what you're asking for. You just were saying they didn't have enough time to flesh out the history. So, I mean, as a shipper, I love relationships in anything I watch.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have more time for friendship and romance arcs.
That's true.
I think that's going to be good.
At least it won't have Elijah Wood. That's
the
saving grace.
Okay, well now you brought up Elijah Wood. We're going to get into that Elijah Wood debate that we talked about in the last podcast. Come on, we got to do it now. We said we're going to do it.
I was thinking about this. I was slaving over this in preparation.
Yeah, as you'd have to find Eve with a perfectly good performance.
I think a couple things. One, I will concede that I think part of the challenge that Elijah Wood faces for me is I love Sean Astin. I absolutely love Sean Astin.
That's fair.
And every scene that Frodo is in, he's constantly right next to Sean Astin.
Right.
And so there's that very easy comparison for me between the two. This is very subjective. I just love Sean Astin, and I think he plays Sam so well that I think it'd be, I think part of my evaluation of Elijah is definitely being informed by how well I feel like Sam's character.
Listen to you pounding the desk.
That being said, I think part of the qualms that I have as I thought about it more is more so with how Jackson portrayed Frodo and versus how Elijah played Frodo. Mm-hmm. So Frodo in the books, to me, one is older, and I think there's part of it wrapped up in that. But I think generally speaking, he comes across to me as much more cultured and strong in character in the books than he did in the films. In the films, and part of that too is in the film. Elijah is having to very visually demonstrate to us everything that Frodo is going through.
That was going to be my main point in his defense, is he presumably is fighting the crux of this battle internally.
Right.
And yet,
which you can see in the books.
And
you see
yet
his thoughts.
he's given some of the fewest lines of all the Fellowship.
Right.
And so in order to just portray that all in slow motion facially, his limitations, I think, are the director choices.
The slow motion?
Yeah, and because when he does do it, I think he does it well. I think the pity that he shows for Smeagol comes through really well.
I like those scenes.
I think him turning against Sam comes through really well. I just think when he's given the chance to show something, I think he does it really well. That doesn't mean I love Frodo, but I really like Elijah Wood.
You like Elijah? Yeah. I think one of the things too that they kind of getting to what you said about him and Smeagol. Did you all get the sense that in the movie, just kind of putting yourself back in the first time you watched it, did it feel like a mistake? Like the way the movie portrays his decision to put faith in Smeagol. In the books, it's pretty clear that it's not. That was there was some strength of character and some, even that's part of what makes him a heroic character in the books is this pity and trust and faith that he puts in who Smeagol is. Again, this is kind of getting to just what my own subjective interpretation. In the movie, it kind of came across a little bit more like a mistake at points. Sam was
biased. Toward Sean Astin. And take
that actually makes a lot of sense.
That Samwise makes here. So knowing the end and knowing that Gollum cannot overcome his own weakness, I still pity him, root for him, and want to believe in his redemption through Two Towers. When he's in that room and he's shouting at Gollum, "Go away and never come back," and then it's silent, and the next day he's all happy and he's gaffing with Samwise and talking about fish and stuff. I love that, and I think Frodo is making a good choice, and in a way he's listening to counsel, because in the former movie he tells us that it's a pity he's not dead, and then the next time he sees him, he's heeding the counsel of Gandalf, and he says, or maybe he just realizes it on his own, but he's like, now that I see him, I do pity him. And so I think he showcases mercy, and ultimately the end that comes about is because of Smeagol in a twisted kind of way. But I root for it. I don't think that's a mistake. I don't get that's gonna lead you guys on the wrong path. I actually get frustrated with Sam for being so rash, because I think he has a prudent perspective, and he could have been so much more diplomatic. Well, he's kicking Smeagol and yanking him down. We should tie him up and leave him to die. It's if you're gonna argue that Smeagol's not to be trusted, you probably shouldn't be the most heinous you've been through the whole movie.
Sam has some serious emotional rage problems. They're buried deep in his soul, and it's all coming out on Smeagol.
Yeah. It's all because he didn't shoot his shot with Rosie before the Fellowship left.
All that frustration, man. He's got to get it out someplace, I guess, and he's got to take it all out on him.
So I will leave you all with my greatest frustration with Elijah Woods having played Frodo, and that is that I cannot imagine someone whose skin is smoother than my 9-month-old son
my gosh,
having hairy feet. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, you know what's crazy about it is he does have hairy feet because we saw that he has hairy feet. So,
well, glue can do anything.
No better argument than hairy feet.
I'll tell you what. I'm just a confrontational person, so it's making me like Frodo even more. But yeah, what's funny is I know what you mean, but I think
I'm totally kidding.
Boils down to not with the feet, just in general, with
Okay.
Frodo's representation through Elijah Wood.
Mhm.
I think the biggest problem is he just doesn't talk enough. He doesn't get enough time to contemplate what's going on inside of him and what he's struggling with.
Yeah.
And again, I think part of that's like the Matrix effect, where they just really loved the slow motion and the eye rolling, and
Right.
because I mean, his conversations with Gandalf and Sam, those are some of, I think, the best parts of the movie. One part that really moves me is when Frodo kicks Sam out of their party.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like
wait, Joel, Dan, this is Return of the King.
You're right.
We're starting to actually in the books.
Uh-oh.
Actually, in the books, it might have been. I forget.
The balance, man.
But yeah, I like Frodo when he has a chance to
speak. Yeah.
Show what Frodo's going through.
Yeah.
Because Elijah Wood can obviously act, and it doesn't feel like he's given the opportunity to really spread his wings.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he has to resort to using these like
Sam,
or like
yeah,
these like
those facial expressions.
Yeah, I think the Osgiliath scene is another great example of. I just am not a huge fan of the whole slow motion, panting and sighing. Yeah.
It's your Sam.
Frodo looks like he's constipated for most of the film. That's just the truth.
Yeah, maybe that's
not his fault.
So, yeah. Okay, another thing I wanted to talk about was henchmen, because you had the mouth behind you.
Mm.
You did earlier. Yeah.
So
Grima.
Yeah, so Grima, maybe that is Osgiliath. Here I go, getting my movies mixed up again. The Battle of Osgiliath, does that happens in Return of the King, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll leave that for next one. But Grima Wormtongue, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that scene.
I do too. I really like Grima, and I didn't notice this the first few times I watched the movie, but that tear he has when Saruman shows him the army that he's about to unleash. Did you all notice that? Have you? Yeah, I never noticed that, and I really like that about his character. I think there's a lot of depth to Grima, and they actually, in some ways, again, this is another change from the movie. From the book, the movie kind of portrays Saruman as having a bit more direct power over Theoden than he does in the books. Like there's that whole possession scene where Gandalf kind of casts him out, and he's been possessed by Plantir. So that influence was a lot more indirect and subtle through Grima in the book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's an interesting
cool,
part. It looks like you won't have any answers, but one of the things I was going to ask you is this recent time, I noticed that Gandalf's reincarnation seemed, by the scene, less important than Saruman's knowledge of it. Because he's laughing at him, saying, because Gandalf, I would say, casts a spell or an incantation, and he says, you won't harm him, whatever, and he starts laughing at him, and it isn't until he throws off his cloak and shows him. And so I'm wondering, in Tolkien's world, what is the nature of wizardly powers, and why does he have to show his power for it to be effective. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was intrigued by that this time around.
Yeah.
I love that scene. So I'm glad they changed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it too. I've always thought that was cool. Yeah, when he throws off. Yeah, it is. It's a really cool moment.
Well, just that whole scene where he's like, you wouldn't take an old man from his walking stick. He gives Eric a little wing.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So the conclusion of this scene, I think, is one of the things that I think Lord of the Rings gets really right. And that is Aragorn stopping Theoden from killing Grima. Because there's an inherent goodness to mercy regardless of who you're extending that mercy to. And I mean, a modern analog would be Game of Thrones, and I believe they got it very wrong. Because there were times where characters were deemed worthy of death, which I do agree, sometimes justice would have that be the case. But it's the manner in which a lot of these deaths occurred. They were almost just as twisted as the villains they were killing. And it's this kind of hypocritical, Ramses is the one I can think of. He's a disgusting, terrible person. But then when they end his life, they sink to his level and they're just as disgusting and terrible. Maybe not just as, but they show in themselves the same kind of motives that drove him. But it's just all of a sudden okay because he's such a corrupted character. So when Aragorn says, enough blood has been spilt on his account and they want to let him go, I think there's a nobility there that I don't see a lot in movies. I see a lot of this like comeuppance and the bad guy gets theirs in maybe a violent, disgusting way. So
and in a way that kind of detracts from the goodness of the good people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like in
because goodness is
Batman,
boring.
Dark Knight, Joker doesn't want to live. As a matter of fact, Batman showing mercy to Joker in preserving his life is just as much of a loss. He's when he's like driving at him and he's like, hit me. All he wants to do is corrupt the incorruptible. And so I think there's a theme there that Tolkien obviously understands pretty deeply because of his, association with Christianity. But just the idea that there's a corrupting nature to not being in a position to give mercy any longer. But yeah, I really liked that. I like Aragorn a lot too. I think he's a...
Even, What did you think of Grima spitting on his hand?
I don't remember that.
After Aragorn stops Theoden, he goes down to help Grima up.
Yeah.
And Grima just goes.
Yeah. But you're right, Dan. That is kind of the biggest problem with a lot of things, because like Game of Thrones did have that problem where you're supposed to have all these villains, but if you're making the good guys almost fall as low as the bad guys, unless it's a story of redemption, and that has to be the ultimate turnaround to get the character to go forward the next step of his development or life.
Yeah.
You can't cheer for the heroes if they're falling as far as the villains, because then they become as bad as them. And if we're not cheering for the villains, then why are we cheering for this man who's supposed to be the quote unquote good guy?
Yeah.
Leaves you with no exemplars. Yep.
I do like the recognition in the flaws of heroes and the legitimate ideologies that maybe fuel a madman. Thanos is a great example where
sure,
if he wasn't trying to end half of all life everywhere, you might be able to understand his aim, or at least you can recognize the value in his aim, and that he's just taken it too far. And I think that's kind of a beautiful villain too, and that is kind of a kind of villainy that the Tolkien movies lack, at least.
Sure.
In the Lord of the Rings, Sauron is just
pure evil.
Dark, Maiar force living forever, always gonna just work to the end of evil. And again, I think that's like the Christian analog. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a balance that you can achieve with corrupting your heroes and giving a little glimmer of light to your villains.
Indeed. It's true. So one thing we haven't talked about yet is with all the stuff that was added to the extended cut, the differences between Fellowship and Two Towers. Do you feel like, I know, Dan, I know for sure you loved the way Fellowship was extended, and you thought that really benefited the movie as a whole. And I know, Alister, even you thought that too. Do you think Two Towers benefited from the extended stuff as much as Fellowship, or did some of it still feel kind of like it didn't need to be there?
I feel like I always talk first, so I'll let Dan speak.
Okay.
So I think, again, it's been so long since I've watched the standard editions, the theatrical cuts, that I don't always know what is extended. But at the very least, I think the extensions in Two Towers don't function in the same way as Fellowship. In Fellowship, as I said, I think they move the lore. They expose more of the lore. In Two Towers, though, I like them just as much because they kind of expose more of the characters and either their emotions or their friendships with one another, like the funeral, the extension of the funeral. I like that. I think it adds feeling to it. I really like the extension between Pippin and Merry because I just like the way they interact with one another. So yeah, I like them. I wouldn't go without any of them, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a number of things that I liked better about the extended. I guess the ones kind of speaking to some that I felt like did enhance the lore was the moment where Treebeard sings the Song of the Entwives. Because that song didn't really, him kind of sharing with us on the Entwives didn't really seem to directly impact the current issues at all. But I really liked that. Sure. I really liked how he shared about that.
And that's like a great joke too. What do they look like? I don't remember.
And I really like the Ring of Bara here, where Grima had noticed that ring on Aragorn's finger, and then was describing it in the extended version to Saruman, and Saruman recognizes who he is from that, and I thought that was really cool.
Also kind of speaks against it, right? He's like, that line died off.
Right.
Do you think he is just trying to make himself feel better there? Or
I think so. Yeah, okay. I think so. I think that well, I guess I don't know, but to me, if I was in Saruman's shoes, the moment that Gandalf escaped in the Fellowship would be the moment when my own sense of my infallibility would be wounded. And I think continued signs of the potential for his own defeat, things like that, or things like the heir of Isildur showing up. I think that a man as prideful as Saruman would have to kind of internally defend himself against that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But some of the comedy I really liked, like kind of getting back to the extended scene in Fangorn, I loved some of Gimli's dialogue. Like where I think Aragorn's like, lower your axe when the tree when the trees are kind of freaking out, and then after and then Gandalf's talking about the Ents, and he says they're strong, and Gimli's like, strong? Oh, that's good.
Every time Gimli opens his mouth, I want to crack up.
Yeah, Gimli's great.
And then there were some other scenes like the ones you all had mentioned that I felt like just really enhance the overall story. Well, like I liked the extended scene about the banishment of Éomer, where we see how that the king himself signed this order. It wasn't just Grima acting in some self-authenticating way.
Yeah.
Like he had the seal of the king, and it just kind of showed how far the king has fallen, that he would banish his own kin like that.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of along similar lines, I liked the massacre at the fords, where you kind of, I guess it gave a little bit more. I always felt like the cinematic version that the whole tension between Isengard and Rohan seemed to be a bit rushed. And like little scenes like that that like the end of that battle at the fords of Isengard where Theodred's already, we were kind of introduced to his character even just a little bit, and kind of see the tension building between Saruman and Rohan. So I some of the stuff I really liked as I was kind of reviewing some of the extended stuff.
Nothing overly stood out to me. Like Fellowship, I could kind of tell certain parts that were extended. The only thing I think in Two Towers that really stood out was the stuff in the forest with Merry and Pippin and the trees, because it just felt like that went on a long period of time. I felt like it kind of felt like it slowed the movie down a little bit. I mean, I like the insight and I like being able to get all the information, but I could see why like that was extremely cut down in the theatrical cut, because
Slow down. Buckle up for Return of the King. I distinctly remember sweating my butt off in a movie theater seat, thinking like, okay, this is the end. Well, maybe this then is
every time.
Like, oh my gosh. I mean, I was enjoying it, but at the same time, that was a haul.
Yeah, it was definitely a thing. And then I looked at the running time for the extended Return of the King, and I'm like, oh god.
Yeah.
Like, oh god, man. So there's like almost an hour's worth of added stuff. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Please tell me it all works. Does the flow of it still work though, even though it's an hour longer?
Return of the King is exciting. I think it's the resolving action after the victory at Minas Tirith that there's just no way to put a cap on that and have it go for so long. At the same time, I think there's a really important element of what they talk about. Is it in Two Towers where like things not really being able to go quite back to normal? Yeah, it's kind of like when Sam is talking about how darkness passes too.
Oh, yes.
At the end of Return of the King, it kind of feels like Sam was right, but you also never really get past that dark. Dark.
You don't come out unscathed.
But yeah, I advocate for extended editions, even in Return of the King. But I did note I actually split Two Towers into 2 watch sessions.
I did too.
Yeah. I think that's just because
I've never done such a thing.
Yeah, I don't think I had either.
I'm waiting for you to say it, Alister. That's a crime. How dare you both? Shame on you.
At least a misdemeanor, not quite a felony.
Alister did 2 watch sessions, but it was the whole movie both times.
Yeah,
so.
he had to get up to take the discs out and put them back in. That was it. And push play.
So one of the scenes I really liked this time around was when Aragorn was encouraging King Theoden to call for aid. And Theoden is being a little bit short with him, saying, we're not as lucky in our friends as you are. Gondor, where was Gondor when the West Gondor? Yeah, and then he starts to say, where was, and he stops himself. And I turned to Mariah and I was like, what do you think he was going to say? And my hypothesis is that he was going to start talking about his son. But he decided that he had gotten too angry and too personal, and he reined himself in a little bit. But did the books kind of talk about anything he would have been upset with? Or
oh gosh, I don't. That's I know it. Yeah, I know exactly what line you're thinking about. That's cool to think about if he was thinking about Theodred. I don't remember.
He was like getting angry at Gondor.
Yeah, right. I like that thought a lot. Where was I? Yeah, let me feel free to keep talking. I'm curious. Though.
Well, yeah, and maybe when he's saying like, where were they when? But then he had to stop because he notices that part of this stuff is his fault.
Yeah. I'll have to look into that. That's a really good question. And I am curious if the books kind of give any insight into that.
It's making me want to read them. I enjoyed the first one, and then I lost it. I had this big hulking 3-in-1. It was just a soft cover, and I used to try and read it when I would ride a stationary bike in the mornings when I lived in this apartment complex. And I think I left it in there one day. But I got a new one. It actually looks pretty good. Oh, I don't have it in here. For the next one, I'll bring it so you can see it. It looks pretty cool.
So we did this before too. Favorite characters this time around? I know Gandalf was the favorite last time, and what about this time?
Oh, just before I jump into that, it looks so that quote wasn't from the book. That was another one of
added
Peter Jackson's editions. But gosh, it definitely sounded like it could have been from the book.
Well, it's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah.
So Gandalf is not my favorite in The Two Towers, and it's probably just because he's not quite as playful. And he doesn't get as much screen time, I don't think.
No, not even close.
He will likely resurface as my favorite in Return of the King. But for this one, I think it's either going to have to be Gollum, Smeagol and Gollum, or Aragorn.
Okay. Alister?
Sean Astin, baby.
Now my question to you is...
I'm just saying that to echo myself familiar. No, actually, my favorite in Two Towers was Aragorn. And actually, my favorite moment with him is one that isn't highlighted too much, but he's with the people of Rohan, and they're sharpening their swords, trying to get geared up. And Legolas says, "What for? 300 against 10,000?
10,000.
Nakathakasaya! They're all gonna die.
And I will die as one of them.
And what y'all think of his choice to transition to English there?
I don't think it was a choice.
No.
I think it's kind of like when someone gets angry. Well, obviously the symbol is he's
the king.
Common tongue. Yeah.
Yeah. He's their head. Yeah. Yeah. I love that particular line and moment, because I think that's one of the moments when, for me, Aragorn most reveals himself to be a king.
Yeah, definitely.
So I thought you were going to say when he swings that boy's sword and tells him there's all.
I really like that scene too.
For some reason, I remembered the kid getting knighted.
Huh.
But that must be a different movie.
Yeah.
Well, there is a lot of movies
extended. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. So favorite moments with my favorite characters. I like all of Smeagol's monologues in this one. I love the poem he's reciting at the Dead Marshes. I love the resurfacing of Gollum when they're recently captured by Faramir. I love when he's singing at the sacred pool. I think Andy does a really good job of catching that schizophrenia. I don't know. It was cool. And then Aragorn, I think my favorite part is probably the same, where he shouts at Legolas.
Yeah, mine, my favorite two characters I think in this movie are actually Frodo and Sam. I liked a lot of their scenes, especially at the beginning. I liked the journey, and then Smeagol comes in there, and you see all the tension between Frodo and Sam, and how Frodo kind of is with Gollum, and how trusting he gets of him, and how he feels for him too. He feels his pain. And I think that was really the first moment where I looked at Frodo and I really realized that he really is this good-hearted person. And it's easy to understand why the ring is not corrupting him like it's corrupted others, because he really has the compassion for others. And it's almost like he has a incorruptible soul.
Yeah, you definitely see his endurance in Two Towers. Yeah.
Very much so.
I feel like his wrestling with the ring really starts to show itself definitely a bit more than it did in Fellowship.
Do it without Sam though, Al, right?
He needs Sam. Sam's his boy. He's his boy.
I think the spice box with Sam is really all you need to know about him, is his optimism when they're eating the lambas bread, and he's like, "Oh, it's pretty good,
a little bit of home."
Yeah, and he's got the spice in case they should find some roast chicken or something. And the way he's rationed the food, not just for the journey there, but the journey home. He's such a forward-thinking, optimistic guy.
Yeah.
Best line though, it's got to be when Gollum says, "You fat hobbit."
Yeah. I actually got a shirt this year for Christmas that says potatoes, boil up, mash them, stick them in a stew. Mariah got me that one.
Even you could like those.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good scene. I like that scene a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so in the behind the scenes, they did a little bit of how they incorporated Smeagol into the scenes. Mm-hmm. And while they were shooting with the other characters, Andy Serkis was just wearing a green onesie type thing. It wasn't a green screen thing. It was just like a costume of sorts. Mm-hmm. Although they probably used it to green screen him out or mold it or whatever. And they would basically shoot the scenes with these cameras that had motion memory. And so they'd shoot the scene once, and then they could just have the camera go and shoot the scene with no actors. They could have the camera go again and shoot it with just the actors without Andy. So he was kind of a reference point, but then they would use the multiple runs to create a Smeagol-less footage, and then he would get on the motion capture, and he'd be in this room where at the beginning of each take he'd have to position his body a certain way to kind of sync it up with the puppet. They called it the Gollum puppet. And then he had this little mask on where he could see the digital rendering of Gollum and how he could move it. And so he'd jump around, and then they take those motion captures, and that would be what became Smeagol's movement. Cool. And they texture that and everything. It was pretty cool, and I think really ahead of its time.
Yeah, this actually was one of the first films to do it, because there was a company called Weta Digital, and they formed, and this film was the first one to really use the motion capture. And Andy also played Caesar in the Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Oh, okay.
And
really?
they used the same technology to capture all of Caesar's emotions, and especially in Planet of the Apes, how they captured everything just in the eyes, and you can see it with Gollum too. Yeah. Just how great the technology is, and even how much better it is now. But that's why Andy Serkis, he's the best thing for this. I mean, he's played that. He's played Planet of the Apes. He's played Snoke. I think there's another one he's played as well. He actually just got hired to direct the next Venom movie too.
Interesting.
As well, so he's kind of transitioning to director. And I think he won an Oscar, I believe, for Lord of the Rings as well for the capture.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So why did Gollum work so much better than Jar Jar?
Well,
Gollum is silly. Gollum is a foil, as Jar Jar can sometimes be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the problem was too is that Jar Jar was very juvenile, but I think what people don't realize is that the character was written that way for the child audience for the Phantom Menace. That's why I've always considered Phantom Menace to be the most kid-like juvenile chapter of the whole saga. But they used similar technology with Jar Jar, but it was still very much early compared to this.
I had heard that Michael Jackson wanted to play Jar Jar until he found out it was a digital character. Yeah, he thought it would be a prosthetic character.
Oh my God.
And Michael Jackson was interested. There's actually, this is obviously leaving the movie topic at hand, but there's a great interview with the actor that voice acts Jar Jar.
Uh-huh.
And he just kind of talks about how hated the character is and, and how it didn't seem that way while they were filming, and it was kind of a surprise to him after it was all said and done.
I heard he became because of all the backlash. They said he even got suicidal
Oh,
because there was so
really?
much backlash, because there was so much hate, and
Wow.
he felt hated and discouraged, and
Wow.
it wasn't good. And actually, there's two Phantom Menace stories. He had those same problems, and so did Jake Lloyd, who played young Anakin Skywalker. If you look at him now, he's a very troubled kid. He's been in and out of jail. He was on drugs because I
Wow.
guess that after he filmed Phantom Menace, he was so belittled and teased because little
Because
Anakin
he
was,
did such a horrible job.
well, you know. So, I mean, Phantom Menace wasn't really too kind to some cast members after it
Boy,
happened.
Yeah.
fans can
Jeez.
be pretty crazy.
Ruthless,
Yeah.
for sure.
Wow.
So think about that before you start making fun of Elijah Wood's skin and chin.
Yeah, I always wonder if Gollum's so Jar Jar I felt like was in part, well, maybe it's just maybe I'm seeing it through what he's become to viewers, but I felt like he was supposed to be comedic relief.
Mhm.
Whereas Smeagol, I think the moments when you start to see kind of like a goofy side to him I think are moments where you start to have hope for his redemption.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just kind of takes on I feel like a different tone and but were you talking more about the way they digitized him?
I think you hit it right. How there's just so much about Gollum that's real, that evokes emotion from me. And Jar Jar does little more than make me angry. I mean, he feels cheesy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't buy, he's too contrived. Although I will say the scene at the sacred pool where Frodo leads Gollum into being captured by Faramir and his cohort, that felt contrived to me.
It's not in the books.
I just didn't understand the manufacturing of this betrayal by Frodo. Maybe that's the only way they deemed to bring him back around, to bring Gollum back into it, but it just felt like silly. I don't know. That's interesting that it wasn't in the books, because I definitely felt like it was
Out of place.
half-baked. Yeah.
I think I don't know why they changed it, but I think there might be something to Gollum's character development, but the more immediate reason that comes to mind is for the sake of portraying Faramir as a conflicted character. When in the books, his men, not only Faramir alone, but the men of Gondor were always kind to Gollum and never beat him up and kicked him around like they did in the films. So
Yeah, they're like thugs.
Yeah.
So what? How does Smeagol transition back into plotting against Sam and Frodo, if not by the sacred pool?
Yeah. So in the books, the two personalities are far more equivalent. So if I remember correctly, there was I don't think that there was like a moment where he was mistreated and that kind of prompted a resurgence of the Gollum personality. I think that there was just it was a much more subtle transition where the Gollum personality started to gain power and eventually transitioned back towards being the prominent personality.
Okay.
So
which would take more time and is probably more difficult to convey in a visual medium.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, so back to our overall grade of the movies. Unless it's going to be a 10 out of 10 from
11.
Oh Jesus.
What did I say for Fellowship?
I
I think I said 10.
think you said a 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I like
what do
Two
you think?
Towers a lot. I love the battle.
Mhm.
I love the story movement. So much is happening. When the Fellowship splits out, there's a strength in that because everyone's going down their own path. I love Theoden. I love the songs. I think I'm going to go 10.
Better or worse than Fellowship?
I'm such an advocate for Fellowship because it's so underrated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd go with Fellowship better.
Yeah.
I think if I'm going, my rubric is as an adaptation of the books, I think Fellowship was more faithful. So to me, that's important to me.
Yeah, I agree, because just based upon I know from the theatrical cuts, Return of the King was my favorite, but based upon these first two extendeds, Fellowship so far is the best extended version.
Oh, you're winning us over, Dan. You're winning us over.
That was my whole goal.
I was a completely different man 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You're changing Alister.
That's right. Next thing you know, you're gonna say Fellowship, and you could do it without Sam. You really.
Oh man.
You like Frodo.
I don't think Alister's gonna be able to do it without Sam.
There is really cool development, and I love it. But yeah, Fellowship. I've got to say Fellowship too.
Okay. All right, so Dan gave it a 10. So Alister, are you gonna stick with the 11?
I'll stay 10.
Stay 10. So a little below. Okay.
Yeah.
I
can't give Jackson that much credit because of how much he changed.
So a slight notch down.
I'm going with 10.
Okay. Let's see. I gave Fellowship a 9, so I'll put Two Towers at about an 8, just slightly below Fellowship. So, we'll see.
We're softies, Dan. We're soft.
My ratings are. I was just thinking, my ratings are so boring. 10. Oh yeah, 10. This is great.
We're the Paula Abduls of this podcast.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way: when we do the do the Star Wars ones, I'll be the one giving everything a 10, and you guys might be the ones that give stuff below. So it'll probably be
flip-flop. No, you remember Paula from so there were the 3 judges for American Idol.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Simon, of course, was always the 8.
I'm gonna
Mike's
give this
Mike's
one
the
a 10,
Simon.
dog.
I'm the Simon Cowell, and then I'll be the Paula Abdul of Star Wars. It'll flip flop.
I think there's a lot to love about any installment of the Star Wars franchises, but there's also a lot to hate in all of the originals.
Yeah. I won't use the word hate. I would use the word things that could have gone differently, that I would have liked to have seen happen.
Sure.
Than what did.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. That's kind of in a way.
Hate is pretty strong, but
Dan, we're gonna have to work really hard to get Mike to critique those films. But
I'm up for the challenge.
You have no idea how hard of a pull it's gonna be. It's gonna be very, very, very hard.
You're gonna start bad talking them, and we'll be like, good.
Oh boy.
Let the hate flow through you.
I have to figure out though which trilogy I'm going to strongly defend more. I guess it just depends on which ones you guys are harsher on.
You're going to have to defend the prequels to us pretty hard, Mike.
Oh, I can do that.
You know what? I rewatched the prequels, and I might stand in their defense a little bit too. Here's I mean, sneak peek, because this is, maybe we should end this podcast and have a short conversation.
A preview of what's to come.
Yeah.
No, I agree. That's gonna be a fun podcast. It's definitely gonna be a little bit more maybe controversial or confrontational than these, more than likely.
Yeah.
But cool. Okay, so all right, so you guys are still holding firm at your 10s. So yeah. All right. Yeah, thanks for the heart, Alister. And I'll give you guys a laugh.
Wait, he's...
All right. Well, so our last one coming up will be Return of the King. I'm actually looking forward to revisiting that movie.
Me too.
So yeah, we will decide on a time to do that, and then we'll go to our Star Wars ones down the line. So that'll be fun.
Awesome.
That's great.
Cool.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, guys, and we'll see everybody on the Return of the King.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right, have a good night, everybody.
There is still hope. I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
Seas and mountains fall, and we come end of days in the dark.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.